Today we will tell you about mummies. No, not about those. And not even about this one. All these people were famous during their lifetimes. But we want to tell you about those who became world famous after their death. Let's go. Rosalia, Lombardo, the Sicilian town of Palermo. Here, in the Capuchin catacombs, the remains of more than 8,000 people rest in the open, some mummified and some not. Among them, the sleeping beauty Rosalia Lombardo became especially famous. She died of pneumonia just a week before her second birthday. The inconsolable father could not cope with the loss. He turned to the embalming specialist Alfredo Salafia to preserve his daughter's body. Alfredo did an excellent job, but how did he do it? He died before he could finish the embalming. But despite this, Rosalia's skin retained its natural color until the early 2000s, making the child look not dead, but asleep. It was only in the mid-2000s that the first signs of the mummy's decomposition became noticeable. To prevent further destruction of the body's tissues, the coffin with little Rosalia was placed in a glass sarcophagus filled with nitrogen. Bog people. These are fully or partially preserved human remains found in peat bogs in northern Europe. According to the results of radiocarbon analysis, almost all bog people lived during the Iron Age. In total, more than 1,000 ancient bodies have been found in the peat bogs of Europe, but only a few of them are well known. For example, Grauballe man or Tolland man. We don't know the names of these people, but what they ate before their deaths is known. For example, the Tolland man ate a porridge made of barley and flax seeds mixed with weeds and sand, cooked in a clay pot with water from a lake or bog, as well as some fatty fish, possibly river eel. Danish scientists discovered this by re-examining the gastrointestinal tract of the Tolland man. Interestingly, scientists also found that the man suffered from parasites: whipworm, beef tapeworm, and roundworm. The Iceman, Ötzi or Ötzi, the ice mummy of an ancient man, discovered in 1991 in the Tyrolean Alps at an altitude of 3,200 meters. The age of the mummy, determined by radiocarbon dating, is stated to be around 5,300 years. He was 4,045 years old at the time of his death. Quite an advanced age for a person of that era. His body showed clear signs of aging, his joints were worn out, and there was atherosclerosis in his blood vessels. He broke a rib, his nose, and got frostbite on his finger during his life. Ötzi used his teeth as a tool for working with wood, bones, and leather. Traces of blood from 4 people were found on his body. The blood of 2 people was found on the quiver with arrows. Another was Ötzi's own blood, and the blood of the 4th person was on the cloak next to the body. Forensic experts agreed that Ötzi was rescuing a wounded companion and carrying him on his shoulder. In 2001, Italian scientists discovered that an arrowhead was lodged in the mummy's shoulder. The shot was fired from behind, and the arrowhead went in so deep that Ötzi couldn't pull it out. It's possible that 5,000 years ago, a bloody skirmish took place here, and Ötzi didn't make it out alive. Ötzi's genome has also been decoded. It showed that on his mother's side, the Iceman is related to some modern inhabitants of Central Europe. Meanwhile, mutations have been identified that aren't present in current populations. In other words, Ötzi's descendants did not survive to the present day. We discussed Ötzi's tattoos in another episode. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's interesting. Inuit mummies. In 1972, near the Greenland settlement of Kilakitsok, 2 hunter brothers accidentally discovered a burial site of the Inuit, the indigenous people of Greenland. The burial was later dated to the year 1475. In the first grave, the mummies of 6 women were found, lying on top of each other. On top were the bodies of 2 boys, one of whom turned out to be a well-preserved infant. In the next grave, 3 women lay stacked atop one another. Both pits were covered with stones. In 2008, DNA analysis showed a relatively close familial relationship between all the mummies. One of the women had a malignant tumor at the base of her skull, which most likely caused her death. An Inuit infant, a boy about 6 months old, was buried alive with her. The custom of the Inuit at that time required that the child be buried alive or suffocated by his father, if a woman who could nurse him could not be found. Live burial was practiced not only by the Inuit. The Incas even had a special person whose job was to find beautiful, talented women. They were taken from their families, cared for and well-fed for a while, and then sacrificed. Well, obviously, so that the weather would be good and the harvest plentiful. In 1999, on the summit of a volcano, with the hard-to-pronounce name Lulailico, the bodies of 3 children buried there 5 centuries ago were found. The oldest girl was 15 years old. Thanks to the dry cold, her body was well preserved. The scan showed that her internal organs were also in excellent condition. The girl was named La Doncella. She was dressed in expensive clothes for that time, with jewelry, dishes, and food. The condition of her skin and hair was wonderful, and her hair was styled in small braids. DNA taken from her hair showed that earlier the girl ate simple food, vegetables and potatoes. About a year before her death, she started eating meat and corn, and she was cared for. The second girl was about 6 years old when she was sacrificed. Her face, one ear, and part of her shoulder were damaged by a lightning strike that happened after her death. That's why she was given the name Lightning Girl. The boy, El Niño, was about 7 years old at the time of the sacrifice. He was the only child who was tied up. Apparently, he died from stress, as vomit and blood were found on his clothes. According to biochemical analysis of the hair, before the sacrificial ritual began, the children were drugged with coca leaves and a corn beer known as chicha. Then they were placed in a small tomb 1.5 meters underground, where they were left to die. Now all 3 mummies are kept in the Museum of High Mountain Archaeology in an Argentinian city, displayed in cryocapsules, taking turns every day. To see all the mummies, you need to visit the museum 3 times. Almost all known cases of preserved bodies of ancient and not-so-ancient people are the result of the work of talented embalmers. Or is it the work of Mother Nature, when a body, right after death, ends up in special natural conditions, and instead of decaying, it becomes mummified? But there are quite a few cases in history when the body of the deceased remains incorruptible thanks to the conscious efforts of the deceased himself. The incorruptible Lama, Dashi Dorzo Itigalov, the remains of a man who left this world back in 1927, still retains some features characteristic of the living. Moreover, the body of the Buryat saint changes over time. Buddhists believe that Itigalov has conquered death. He was the head of the Buddhist community in eastern Siberia. He possessed, as his followers claim, magical abilities. He could read minds, foresee events, and heal people. On June 15, 1927, Kambo Lama gathered his disciples and announced that he was leaving this world. As a farewell, he asked them to recite the blessing prayer for the departing, which is usually said over the dead. The embarrassed disciples couldn't recite it before their living teacher. Then, Itigalov began to chant it himself, entering a state of meditation, and later the disciples joined in. Gradually, he stopped showing signs of life, and on the 7th day, the religious leader's head bowed. The disciples realized that their teacher's consciousness had entered nirvana. He was buried in the lotus position, and a special wooden box was prepared for him. In his spiritual will, Itigalov asked his followers to exhume him 75 years after his burial. However, Buddhist monks performed exhumations in 1955 after a strong earthquake and in 1973 after a flood to make sure the body was intact. Noting that the saint's body was not decomposing, they performed religious rituals and changed his decayed clothing. The last exhumation, 75 years after his death, was carried out in 2002 in the presence of government officials and scientists. When only the head of the deceased Lama was revealed to those present, everyone was amazed by its incredible preservation, as if it were a living person. The condition of the body was so unusual that Mandarkanov, the forensic medical examiner present at the exhumation, refused to examine the body on his own and demanded the formation of a special commission. The next day, an official examination of the body was carried out by 3 specialists, including 2 heads of the Russian Bureau of Forensic Medicine. According to the specialists, the body looked as if the monk had died yesterday. They all expected the body to decompose rapidly, within a matter of hours, as sometimes happens when sealed graves are opened, and they were very surprised when this did not happen. The second and final examination was conducted in November 2004. The researchers' verdict: Itigilov is slowly but surely turning into a mummy. Now the body of the Kambo Lama is kept in the main Buddhist temple in Buryatia. Many stories and documentaries have been made about Itigilov, so he has become a legend even among people far from Buddhism. Posthumous meditation, known as Tugdam, is a practice of Buddhist monks. They believe that even if doctors have recorded biological death, a person is not yet dead as long as consciousness remains in their body. In the state of Tugdam, it remains in deep meditation. The bodies of monks practicing posthumous meditation may not decompose for several days or weeks. Scientists have only recently become interested in Tugdam. The mystery of Tugdam is the mystery of the potential capabilities of our body, and especially the brain, without any mysticism, purely on a physiological level. These capabilities could open new horizons in understanding our own nature. Under the guidance of scientists from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a study on post-mortem meditation was conducted in India. The study progressed slowly from 2012 to 2019 in 2 stages. Over 7 years, only 13 cases of Tugdam were studied, but only 7 recordings were suitable for analysis. So, the neurophysiologists obtained 7 electroencephalograms of monks in post-mortem meditation aged from 43 to 91 years, with an average age of about 70 years. The time that had passed after the monks diagnosed physiological death ranged from 3 to 5 days, although in one case the recording was started just 26 hours after death. And what then? As you can see in the pictures, compared to a living person, dead people are indeed dead. For neurophysiologists from Wisconsin, Tugdam remained elusive, but it seems that Russian scientists were a bit luckier. To study Tugdam, the founder of the Institute of the Human Brain of the Russian Academy of Sciences, academician Sviatoslav Medvedev, launched a project to research meditation and altered states of consciousness in Tibetan Buddhist monasteries. With the permission of the Dalai Lama, Medvedev opened 2 scientific centers in the south of India. The scientists examined more than 100 meditating monks from 7 different monasteries.
Исследователям предоставили доступ к...
It turned out that mainly they were in the state of Tugdam. The scientists collected psychophysiological data using instruments. The state of the monks' bodies was assessed by a forensic medical examiner. Thus, the researchers obtained scientific evidence that it is fundamentally different from the state of other bodies at similar periods after biological death. According to the authors of the study, under the influence of meditation, certain substances may be released in the body during dying, which protect the cells from decomposition for some time. But this is just a hypothesis. Work was interrupted by the pandemic, results remain preliminary, and no scientific article exists yet. Interestingly, there have been recorded cases of Tugdam among ordinary people. It's rare, but it happens. The heart of 90-year-old Chok Patenzi stopped when she was at home among her family. Her relatives called an ambulance, but the doctor pronounced her dead. After 3 days in the hot and humid weather, it happened in the slums of India, and the cremation was to take place at home, the color of the deceased grandmother's skin did not change. There was no hint of the smell of decomposition, and it seemed as if she hadn't died at all, just sleeping deeply. In Japan, the practice of voluntary self-mummification by Buddhist monks, an analog of Tugdam, is called Sokushin Butsu. Hundreds of the most devoted monks prepared for this for years, but only a few succeeded. They had to become hermits, moving far away from people, usually into the mountains, and follow a strict wood-based diet, which resulted in the body losing fat and muscle along with fluids. At the same time, the monks drank tea made from the leaves of the lacquer tree, which contains toxins also found in poisonous ivy, for example. In short, they gradually became mummies while still alive. In the end, the monk would sit down to meditate in a pine box. The box was lowered into a pit several meters deep and surrounded on all sides with charcoal. Only a bamboo tube was inserted to let air in, and a string was attached that led to a bell above. The monk used it to show he was alive. When he stopped, the box was raised and checked. If the monk had died, they would remove the tube, seal the box completely, and bury it back in the charcoal, leaving it for another 1,000 days. And after this period, if the deceased was decomposing, They would perform the funeral rites and bury him. If preserved, the body would be taken to the temple for veneration as a relic. The oldest of such mummies is 238 years old. It still remains in the temple of a small town in northern Japan today. By the way, not everywhere do mummies have to be holy or especially revered. In Oceania, a mummy might join you at the same table during a celebration. Scenes like these, where a dead person is taken out of the coffin and paraded around the city or village as a beautifully dressed mummy, are normal there. We'll cover that in more detail in another episode about burial traditions. You'll find the link below the video. Thank you for joining us, and see you again on the Kramala channel.